Hi and welcome, I'm Andy Miocha and you are watching A News. Here are the headlines. Donald Trump says trade deals with some countries could be announced this week. Volodymyr Zelenskyy says a ceasefire with Russia could begin the moment Kremlin agrees to it. Israeli Air Force conducts airstrikes on Yemen in response to the Houthi missile attack on Tel Aviv. Local media reports US attacks as well. Thank you for tuning in. US President Donald Trump said some of the trade deals being negotiated with countries might be announced this week. As markets closely watch for developments, our Ubay Shabander brings the latest from Washington.
U.S. President Donald Trump has indicated that a trade deal with some countries could be announced this week, as he has sought to address market concerns about the repercussions of a global trade war. President Trump told reporters this weekend that he is willing to consider alleviating the massive 145% tariff on Chinese imports. The opening for a potential thaw in Beijing-Washington trade relations is reassuring to some investors. Beijing has said that it is evaluating approaches from U.S. officials to start negotiations about tariffs. China has reportedly compiled a list of American goods exempt from its 125% tariff, aiming to ease trade relations without making any public concessions. President Trump has said that he believes that his tariffs have caused China significant economic pain, and he recognizes that a deal has to be made with Beijing at some point, though it would have to be made on terms favorable to the United States. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent published an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal this weekend, where he credited President Trump's policies for finding solutions to the loss of manufacturing jobs and the decline in real income in America. The administration says all these things were caused by trade liberalization and offshoring production to China over the past few decades. President Trump has himself recognized that his trade policies and tariffs on China will likely have an impact on consumer consumption in the U.S., but that ultimately the net benefits would outweigh the short-term losses. I'm Ubay Shabander in Washington, D.C., A News.
Donald Trump announced a 100% tariff on all foreign-made movies, citing the need to rescue what he described as a dying Hollywood. He claims international competitors are stealing America's movie-making capabilities.
US President Donald Trump ordered a new 100% tariff on all movies made outside the US, claiming Hollywood is dying a very fast death. Trump said he was authorizing the relevant government agencies, such as the Department of Commerce, to immediately begin the process of imposing a 100% tariff on all films produced abroad that are then sent into the United States.
Movie tariffs, what they've done is other nations have been stealing the movie-making capabilities from the United States. And I said to a couple of people, what do you think? I've done some very strong research over the last week, and we're making very few movies now. Hollywood is being destroyed. Now, you have an incompetent, grossly incompetent governor that allowed that to happen, so I'm not just blaming other nations, but other nations, a lot of them, have stolen our movie industry.
According to research firm Prod Preo, nearly half of US spending on TV projects, over $40 million in 2023, went overseas. Foreign locations like the Czech Republic and Hungary continue to attract filmmakers with skilled crews, lower labor costs, and generous production incentives. Central Europe, with its castles and scenic countryside, has become a go-to for historical and fantasy productions. Big-budget films like Netflix's $200 million The Gray Man are among the many international projects driving Hollywood's growing overseas investments. Major studios, including Disney and Netflix, have also filmed in countries like Canada and the UK to take advantage of tax breaks.
More news from Washington. Donald Trump has ordered the reopening of Alcatraz, the infamous island prison near San Francisco. It has been closed for more than 60 years and is currently a major tourist attraction.
US President Donald Trump is directing the federal government to rebuild and reopen Alcatraz, the high-security prison on an island in San Francisco Bay that was shut down more than 60 years ago. In a post on his Truth Social platform, Trump called for it to house America's most ruthless and violent offenders. Alcatraz was considered America's most secure prison given the island location, frigid waters, and strong currents. No successful escapes were ever officially recorded from Alcatraz. It operated from 1934 to 1963 and held some of the most notorious criminals in American history, including Al Capone and George Machine Gun Kelly. The prison was closed due to crumbling infrastructure and the high cost of operation, with everything from food to fuel needing to be transported by boat. Since then, it has become a major tourist destination managed by the National Park Service and is protected as a National Historic Landmark. Trump said he came up with the idea after growing frustrated with what he called radicalized judges insisting on due process for deportees. He described Alcatraz as a symbol of law and order with, in his words, quite a history. A spokesperson for the Bureau of Prisons confirmed the agency would follow presidential orders, but did not comment on how reopening Alcatraz could be achieved, especially given that the island is no longer under its control.
Donald Trump said he had a productive call with Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on the war in Ukraine, as well as Syria and Gaza. Taking to his Truth Social, Trump said that he's looking forward to working with Erdogan on getting the, quote, ridiculous but deadly war between Russia and Ukraine ended now. A ceasefire with Russia is possible the moment Kremlin agrees to it and could begin even today, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said during his visit to Prague. His comments come hours after he rejected the Russian president's declaration of a three-day truce in honor of Victory Day, denouncing it as a theatrical show.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy stated on Sunday that a full ceasefire with Russia could be achieved at any moment and called on Kyiv's allies to intensify pressure on Moscow to help make it a reality. Speaking at a joint press conference in Prague alongside Czech President Petr Pavel, Zelenskyy suggested that a 30-day ceasefire would offer a genuine opportunity for diplomacy to succeed.
We believe that ceasefire is possible at any moment, even starting today, and should last for at least 30 days to give diplomacy a real chance.
Zelenskyy dismissed recent Russian statements about a partial ceasefire as disingenuous, citing a surge in assaults on Ukrainian positions.
For example, in the past days, they have been saying that they want some partial ceasefire, but you should know that number of assaults these days was the highest in the past months. They conducted more than 200 assaults. If anyone still believes them, they can test it.
He reiterated support for a US-backed proposal for a full and unconditional ceasefire and stressed the importance of Western unity. On military cooperation, Zelenskyy praised Prague's ammunition initiative and said Ukraine expects to receive 1.8 million shells in 2025.
We count that cooperation will be as effective as it was last year. Tomorrow we will hold meetings with Czech defense companies, and we are working on more details.
Meanwhile, Ukraine faced a fresh wave of Russian drone strikes on Sunday. At least 11 people, including 2 children, were injured in Kyiv, and multiple fires broke out in residential buildings. Ukraine's emergency services deployed 76 firefighters as falling debris sparked fires in Obolonsky and Sviatoshinsky districts. The military said 69 out of 165 drones were shot down, and dozens more were neutralized via electronic warfare. There was no immediate comment from Moscow.
The recently signed U.S.-Ukraine minerals deal is set to grant Washington preferential access to Ukraine's natural resources. Efforts to develop mining operations in the country, however, could face significant delays, given the security situation and outdated geological information, according to industry experts cited by the Washington Post.
A highly publicized US-Ukraine mineral extraction agreement, initially promoted as a step forward in strategic cooperation, is encountering substantial logistical and economic hurdles. Specialists indicate that outdated Soviet-era maps and the absence of contemporary geological research are major barriers, potentially delaying effective extraction for at least a decade. Under the agreement, the US has secured rights to mine critical minerals such as titanium, lithium, and graphite, resources essential for manufacturing weapons, electronics, and batteries. The deal also covers oil and gas extraction rights, with proceeds intended to help finance Ukraine's post-conflict. However, analysts stress that practical benefits to the US supply chain from these operations are distant. Reed Blakemore, director at the Atlantic Council Global Energy Center, highlighted the deal's limitations, stating, "This absolutely is not a solution to immediate supply chain issues. It does not address the short-term vulnerabilities related to China's dominance over these resources." Ukraine's mineral extraction sector has suffered from chronic underinvestment, and reliable geological data remains sparse. CDM Engineering, for example, has only recently begun testing groundwater around the Polokivska lithium deposit in the Kirovohrad region. Furthermore, Ukraine currently has no confirmed reserves of the critical rare earth metals necessary for defense and electronics manufacturing. The ongoing conflict adds further complexity. Significant oil and gas fields are located in areas heavily affected by the war, leading to infrastructure damage that makes operations risky and costly. Energy expert Ben Cahill from the University of Texas at Austin explained, "Larger companies with opportunities elsewhere may not find Ukraine competitive enough to justify investment, although smaller firms might still consider the risks." Furthermore, critical mineral expert Ashley Zumwalt-Forbes points out the economic challenges, noting the substantial risks associated with early-stage exploration. "We struggle to raise investment for mineral exploration, even in stable locations like the US and Australia," she said, "so it will be significantly harder in Ukraine." Processing the extracted minerals also presents environmental and logistical challenges, with damaged transport and energy infrastructure, further complicating operations. Despite these challenges, some observers remain optimistic. Jay Truesdale, CEO of TD International, noted the strategic significance, saying, "The deal signals US commitment to Ukraine's economy, potentially offering positive investment outcomes in the long term." Ultimately, while the agreement symbolizes strategic alignment between the US and Ukraine, tangible benefits to resource supply chains remain uncertain and are unlikely to materialize in the near future.
Joining us from Kyiv to talk on the latest surrounding the war in Ukraine is Professor of Comparative Politics at the National University of Kyiv Mohila Academy, Alexi Haran. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Let's start with what we could have heard coming out of Prague. Volodymyr Zelenskyy saying that a ceasefire can begin, quote, even today, if Kremlin agreed. Now that the US and Ukraine have signed the deal and there is a bill in the works in the US Senate with further sanctions on Russia, do you see Washington exerting more pressure on Moscow to agree to the US proposed 30-day ceasefire that Kyiv already agreed to?
Well, mixed feelings. On the one hand, definitely there is an improvement in the atmosphere of American-Ukrainian relations. So actually we did a present to Trump during the last day of his 100 days, because now he may say to his electorate, to his supporters, okay, I have wonderful agreement with Ukraine, you will receive your money back, we will have profit, and so on and so forth. So for Ukraine, it's a possibility. So for Trump, it's a good PR, this deal. As for Ukraine, we managed to change a bit the atmosphere of our relations with Trump, which was very, very difficult. So right after signing of this deal, there were announcements that Ukraine will receive support of $50 million for weapons, and then another announcement was that the package is ready for $310 million support okay, which is definitely a good development for Ukraine. Though it's not for free, we will pay for that. Luckily, we will pay for that by interest from Russian frozen actives, okay, assets, Russian frozen assets. But we will receive this weapon. Regarding sanctions, well, Senator Lindsey Graham, who is quite close to Trump, he introduced the draft bill on sanctions in the Senate, and it will increase the sanctions over Russia. And now it's for Trump to decide whether to sign it or not. And we do not know what would be the decision of Trump. Definitely, we think that Russia demonstrated that Russia is not willing to have a ceasefire. With all these bombardments, we actually expected that Trump will introduce some tough measures against Russia. So far, it didn't happen.
Changing. Now, when we look back at February, when the Russians and the Americans agreed to 4 principles after their talks in Jeddah, they said restoring diplomacy, exploring economic cooperation, to continue engaging in all sorts of things, and to negotiate an end to the war in Ukraine. How much would you say that atmosphere and circumstances have changed specifically when it comes to Washington's approach to Moscow?
Well, look, experts in Ukraine, serious experts in Ukraine, they actually are saying that the basic of the Trump policy regarding Russia didn't change. It's clear that Trump would like to have good relations with Russia. Why? First, to have Russian cooperation with Russia in other regions of the globe. And secondly, because Trump would like to have business as usual with Russia. So basically, he is interested to continue this line, and that's why he is interested to stop the war. The question is in what form? Okay, so now after this development, whether Trump will finally introduce tougher measures regarding Russia. So this is a big question, as I have said. Now we hear actually Russia is frightened by these new sanctions. So Russia announced that Putin is ready for meeting with Trump. But so far, United States said there are no plans for that. We know that this meeting is in kind of preparation, but there's no agreement when it happened and where. So we'll see this development. I think that Trump may introduce serious measures, as I have said, but also that Trump may say, okay, let's try to continue negotiations. Let's have negotiations before I introduce these new sanctions. So we don't know actually now in what direction it will develop.
Now, back to the recently signed minerals deal. Widely welcomed was the omission of prior American military aid, but there was also a lack of explicit mention of security guarantees. There are some estimates that at least 10 years are going to be needed for actual mines to start operating. Do you see American industry giants coming in to start explorations on the ground? And would U.S. capital and staff in Ukraine be maybe enough of a deterrence for Russia, or are concrete security guarantees still needed, in your opinion?
Well, I think that the serious exploration, not to say about investments, can appear only after the end of the war. And that's why I think Russia is not also interested to stop the war. Okay, whatever we are saying or whatever Trump is saying, definitely investors are not going to come with billions of investment if there is a risk, serious risk of Russian aggression and bombardment. So we are talking again. Now it's more about the prospect. prospect of this cooperation and in exploitation of these resources. Will they be a barrier for Russian aggression? There are two possibilities to answer. First is no, because, well, we have McDonald's in Ukraine, we have Coca-Cola in Ukraine, but it didn't stop Russia from bombardment of Kyiv and other cities. Definitely, when we are talking about, serious investment, the US would be more interested to have to defend these interests, okay, to defend their companies. Definitely, they would be interested in the stability of Ukraine. That's right. But so far, it cannot prevent further Russian aggression.
Well,
so it's better to have American investment is better than not to have, definitely. But it's not at the end, the mean to stop Russian aggression.
Well, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your insights. Now to the Middle East. Israeli Air Force is carrying out strikes in Yemen's port city of Hodeidah. According to the country's officials, the strikes come as a response to a Houthi ballistic missile attack which hit the area close to the Ben Gurion airport in Tel Aviv that wounded several people. Shortly before the Israeli strikes, media in Yemen reported strikes carried out by the United States near the capital, Sana'a. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu earlier vowed to retaliate for the Houthi attacks on Sunday. Israel's security cabinet has approved a plan to expand its military offensive against Hamas, which includes the capture of Gaza and the holding of its territory, according to an Israeli official. It is also said to include moving the 2.1 million Palestinians in Gaza towards the south, which could worsen the humanitarian crisis. The cabinet is said to have approved a plan to deliver humanitarian aid through private companies. The UN and other aid agencies have said the proposal would be a breach of basic humanitarian principles and that they will not cooperate. Hamas, in turn, has said Israel's proposal amounted to political blackmail. Joining us to talk on the planned expansion of the offensive in Gaza is Maurice Hirs of the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. Welcome, thank you so much for joining us. Now, capturing Gaza and staying there is one of the things reportedly in the plan approved by the Security Cabinet. Certain ministers, like Finance Minister Smotrich, are already saying that Israel shouldn't fear the word occupation. Do you believe this offensive will take place, and when, or is this maybe another bargaining tool for a possible deal with Hamas?
Well, I think one of the things that we have to remember is that Hamas is still holding, after over 560 days, still holding 59 hostages kidnapped on the 7th of October 2023 as part of the massacre. And that is one of Israel's overreaching goals for this war, to secure the release of the hostages and as soon as possible. In order to do that, obviously, Israel needs to apply maximum pressure to Hamas to ensure that the organization is both incapable of continuing its attacks on Israel and also releases all of the hostages. These are intertwined goals that Israel is, I think, serious about achieving now. We've unfortunately seen Hamas showing a great intransigence in any type of deal moving forward with hostages, and would rather see the media and the screens of everyone around the world filled with the pictures of dead Gazans rather than simply release the hostages they are holding.
We've heard the Hostage and Missing Families Forum today accusing the government of choosing territory over hostages and saying that the decision comes against the will of over 70% of the people. Prior to this, there were letters signed by reservists from all branches calling for an end to the war in Gaza. How much of public support would you say there is for this new expanded offensive?
I think that the reports that you're hearing represent a very, very small section of Israel's society. You have a group of people who call themselves the representatives of the families of the hostages, where in truth they only represent some of the families of the hostages. Other families of the hostages have expressed their unequivocal support for expanding the military operations into Gaza as a means to secure the release of the hostages. And those people who are signing these big letters ostensibly calling for an end to the war are similarly very, very small fringe elements within Israeli society. We saw a major call-up of the reservists happening again for probably the 6th or 7th time, and we had turnouts of over 102% of those people called up were coming in. More people were even called up actually turned up, and I think that is representative of the feeling in Israeli society today and moving forward, trying to get to an end to the war, to defeat Hamas and to release the hostages. That is the major goal.
Well, thank you, Maurice, for joining us and sharing your insights. Still in the region, Iran's defense ministry unveiled the country's latest solid-fueled ballistic missile, state TV reported. TV showed the Qasem Basir ballistic missile during an interview with the country's defense minister. He said it includes improvements in both guidance and maneuverability to overcome layers of defense and easily bypass anti-ballistic defense systems. The missile was most recently tested on April 17th. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi is in Pakistan for talks on the escalating tensions in South Asia. Iran is offering to mediate between India and Pakistan amid fears of a war breaking out. Our Tura Shiralilu brings more from Tehran.
Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi is visiting Islamabad, Pakistan, to discuss a range of bilateral issues and regional developments, including escalation of tension in the South Asian region. Speaking to local media in Pakistan, Foreign Minister Araghchi said that developments in the South Asian region is very important to Iran. He urged India and Pakistan to show restraint and refrain from escalation of tension. Earlier this week, in a telephone conversation with his Pakistani counterpart Mohammad Ishaqdar, Iranian Foreign Minister had expressed Iran's willingness to mediate in the ongoing tension between India and Pakistan. The tension is on the verge of spilling into an armed confrontation after gunmen killed 26 tourists last week in the Indian-administered Kashmir. India and Pakistan, since their independence in 1947 from British colonial rule, have fought 3 full-fledged wars. 2 of these wars were directly over the issue of Kashmir, which is a Muslim-majority region and divided between the 2 neighbors of India and Pakistan. Iran is bordering and neighboring Pakistan along its southeast border. It used to be a neighbor of India up to 1947 when the state of Pakistan was established. Tehran also has traditionally cordial ties with both Islamabad and New Delhi. Unconfirmed reports indicate that Foreign Minister Araghchi is scheduled to visit India this week after returning from Pakistan. Turaj Shiralilu, reporting for A News, Tehran.
Prime Minister of Belarus, Alexander Turchin, has arrived in Azerbaijan for an official visit where he is set to meet Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev. He has already met with the Prime Minister Ali Asadov, and several documents were signed between the 2 countries. Focus of the visit is on boosting bilateral ties and economic cooperation. The Belarusian Prime Minister is also sent to visit reconstruction sites in Fuzuli and Agdam, where Belarus will donate a utility vehicle to support rebuilding efforts. Armenia's deputy prime minister met with the EU ambassador in Yerevan to talk on the country's reform progress and future EU-funded programs. The talks focused on implementing the EU-Armenia Partnership Agreement and advancing the joint economic and investment plan. They also reviewed new initiatives under the Resilience and Growth Plan for the period from 2025 to 2027. The European Union has condemned Moscow's move to restart direct flights to Georgia's Russian-backed breakaway region of Abkhazia. Tbilisi has called the flights illegal and Russia's attempt to tighten the grip on the region. Arneni Nikolaishvili has the details.
The European Union is condemning Russia's decision to restart direct flights to Abkhazia, calling it the clear violation of Georgia's sovereignty. The EU spokesperson, Enver El-Anouni, says that the flights, which have started on May 1st, were launched without Georgia's consent and break the international aviation rules. He says that the EU fully backs Georgia's territorial integrity and its recognized borders. The Sukhumi airport, where the flights were landed, has been closed to international traffic since early 1990s. By opening direct air links between Moscow and Abkhazia, Russia is seen as deepening its control over the region and further isolating it from Tbilisi. The analysts warn that this move could have fateful consequences for the restoration of de facto Georgian sovereignty over the territory and making it complicated to resolve this conflict diplomatically. Tbilisi is also pushing back. The Georgian Foreign Ministry called these flights illegal and calls it Moscow's wider efforts to tighten its grip on the breakaway regions. Now they're urging the international community to respond and demanding that Russia must respect the 2008 EU-brokered ceasefire. But some critics said that these statements may not be enough, warning that EU's influence is limited and Russia is steadily strengthening, holding on Abkhazia despite the international pressure. It's Nini Nikolaishvili, reporting from Tbilisi, News.
A bipartisan bill threatening sanctions on top Georgian officials, but also offering visa liberalization, economic aid and security support if Tbilisi shifts away from anti-Western rhetoric, is set to be discussed in the U.S. House of Representatives. The so-called Megrabari Act was introduced following Georgia's adoption of a foreign agents law. It has already passed the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and now awaits full congressional approval. Georgia's ruling party, Georgian Dream, condemned the bill, calling it hostile. U.S. lawmakers behind the bill say it is a push to support democracy, not punish the Georgian people. An invitation has been extended to U.S. President Donald Trump to visit Uzbekistan during the recent visit of an Uzbek delegation to the United States. Our Fariza Kalimurzina brings more.
In over 30 years of independence, no sitting U.S. president has ever visited Central Asia. President Donald Trump could be the first if he accepts. U.S. Ambassador to Uzbekistan Jonathan Hennick said that the invitation was extended as relations between the two countries continued to strengthen and that it was met with a positive reaction from Trump's team. According to Hennick, after more than 30 years of independence of the countries of the region, now is the most appropriate time for the visit of the American president. The invitation is likely timed to coincide with the C5+1 summit, which marks its 10th anniversary this year. The platform brings together the United States and the 5 Central Asian nations. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has previously emphasized that bolstering the initiative is a key U.S. priority, especially given the current geopolitical volatility. Washington's interest in Central Asia goes beyond diplomacy. As global competition intensifies, the region is emerging as a new geopolitical hotspot. With its reserves of strategically critical minerals, Central Asia has gained renewed importance for the U.S. Trump has already announced plans to ramp up domestic production of rare earth elements. And experts believe that deeper cooperation with the region is only a matter of time. Alongside Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan may play a pivotal role in this strategy. Tashkent has pursued a relatively balanced foreign policy, maintaining some distance from both Beijing and Moscow. The US has supported Uzbekistan's efforts to join the World Trade Organization, and last year the two countries signed an agreement to expand access to American markets. Central Asia has not been a primary focus of US foreign policy in recent years. However, with Trump's return to the political stage, a potential visit to Central Asia could signal a shift in US strategy and an effort to rebuild relations with the region under new terms. Fariza Kalimurzina, A News, in Almaty, Kazakhstan.
Afghanistan is seeking stronger agricultural ties with Kazakhstan. A ministerial meeting to discuss investments in farming, livestock and irrigation was held in Kabul. Our Tamim Bahis has more.
Afghanistan's Minister of Agriculture, Irrigation and Livestock, Ataullah Omari, met with Kazakhstan's ambassador to Afghanistan, Gaziz Akbasov, in Kabul to discuss strengthening agricultural ties between the two countries. According to the ministry, Minister Omari encouraged Kazakhstan to invest in Afghanistan's agriculture, livestock and irrigation sectors. He said Afghanistan is committed to offering full support and facilities for foreign investors interested in the Afghan market. In response, Ambassador Akbasov proposed a formal agreement focused on plant protection and quarantine measures to support safer and more efficient trade in agricultural products. Minister Omari welcomed the initiative, calling for practical cooperation between the two nations. This comes on the heels of a recent visit by Kazakhstan's Deputy Prime Minister to Kabul, where both countries agreed to boost bilateral trade to $3 billion. The Afghan government views agricultural investment as a key pillar for economic recovery, and this growing cooperation with Kazakhstan signals a potential shift in regional trade and development. This is Tamim Bahis in Kabul for A News.
Baku hosted an international conference dedicated to Azerbaijan's pharmaceutical industry. Talks and panels were held on topics of cooperation in the sector and the development of production.
Baku hosted the international conference, The Pharmaceutical Industry of Azerbaijan, yesterday, today and tomorrow, organised by Azerbaijan's Health Ministry and the Embassy of Hungary. Speakers highlighted the growth of Azerbaijan's pharmaceutical sector and new production sites. Hungarian Ambassador Tamás Torma noted the key role of pharmaceuticals in bilateral trade and stressed expanding academic cooperation. The pharmaceutical industry was highlighted as strategic for health and the economy, with special emphasis on Piralahi Industrial Park and the Azerbaijan Medical University's pharmacy faculty.
I would like to highlight that we have very strong political relationship between our two countries, characterized by a very strong bond between our leaders. And this strong partnership and sympathy, mutual sympathy, can be felt in every part of the society when I talk to Azerbaijani people. So there are very, very strong bonds. And what is interesting here, that pharmaceutical industry very well reflects the strengths and the intensivity and the friendly nature of our bonds between our countries.
Azerbaijan has invested over 6.9 billion manats in industrial zones, creating more than 10,000 jobs. The Piralahi Industrial Park, established in 2016, is the first specialized pharmaceutical zone, with 7 companies operating and expansion plans underway. Key projects include a joint plant with Turkish Gen Ilaç, Scandence in Herkmili, and Biopharmax in the Aliyat Free Economic Zone. In 2024, pharmaceutical production rose by 81.5%, reaching 20 million mannets, with medicine production up by 4%. To support local production, a tax and customs incentive mechanism has been implemented, granting exemptions for projects worth 50 million mannets.
Well, that's all we have for you for now. Thank you so much for watching, and do stay tuned to A News.